What is the scariest thing you have ever experienced? Got caught in a riptide 200 yards of shore with all of my family, including my at the time 6-year-old little sister. We all made it out fine except my dad. He was so exhausted from carrying my sister that he was barely able to stay afloat. They had to send a rescue crew to get him. We all made it out alive, thank God. Amphetamine-induced psychosis. I spent a period of time addicted to crystal meth, and the psychosis one goes through after having not slept for days at a time is scary. You see shadow people. You believe everyone is out to get you. Every conversation out of your earshot is about you. Your delusions become very real. At one point there were leprechauns that were out to kill me. I saw the leprechauns. I heard them whispering and plotting against me. It's insane. I'm so glad that's in the past. My wife and I had already lost twins at 8 weeks and a daughter at 20 weeks and suffered under years of infertility. We had twins. They came early. Neither one was breathing and my wife's BP was critically dropping. As a father in the I had 3 of the people I loved most in this world in severe medical distress, and I had no idea what to do for any of the 3. I was useless, in the way, and paralyzed with fear about what was going to happen. I have never felt so helpless in my entire life. I've actually never told this story before, but when I was about 7 I was lured into a shed by a person who had in the past sexually assaulted me. I guess they were afraid I was going to tell, so they tied my long shirt sleeves behind my back and slowly covered my nose and mouth with duct tape and left me laying there. It was like falling down a long tunnel. I had left my mouth open slightly, so I started pushing with my tongue to break the seal around my mouth as I worked my hands free. I managed to get out, and I was so scared I never told anyone. It's honestly the only time I remember fearing for my life. Probably the aftermath of a grand mal/tonic-clonic seizure in which I fractured a vertebra. I woke up on the ground with 2 strangers over me while I was in the worst pain I had ever experienced, and I didn't know where I was or who these people were. Turned out to be EMTs, or why I was in too much pain to move. They kept asking really simple questions and I just didn't know the answers, which freaked me out more. It was May, and they asked what month it was. I thought really hard and didn't know, and I looked outside and thought it looked like August and gave that as my guess. They asked where I was. I didn't know that either. It turned out to be my living room. My girlfriend was also right there, having called the ambulance. They asked me my girlfriend's name. I said I didn't have a girlfriend. This was a very different form of negative emotion. I feel so guilty about that, even though there was nothing I could have done about it. I also feel guilty about having had a seizure in front of her because it scared the shit out of her. Let me preface this story with, I have a phobia of water. I can't see the bottom of r/thalassophobia for anyone wondering if they have the same thing. When I was younger, my brother was driving me home at night from a 4-H model railroading meeting. This was February in Indiana and we were driving on country roads to get home. We came to a stop sign, and when my brother touched the brakes to slow down, the SUV we were in went sideways on black ice. In an attempt to save it, he overcorrected, and we ended up in this slow angled descent into a drainage ditch. When the driver's side tire went into the icy black water of the ditch, the truck slowly lurched onto the driver's side and then upside down into the water. Black freezing deck began rushing into the truck and I nearly lost my mind. My brother put his hand on the ceiling and released his belt, and I tried to do the same, but being 5 years younger and in near panic, I couldn't get my buckle undone. So I had to use both hands and fell into a clump on the floor. We clambered to the back of the vehicle and my brother began kicking the side window to no avail. At this point I had enough wherewithal to find a pair of my dad's needle nose pliers and shatter the rear windshield so we could climb out. The water was only like 2 feet deep, but I didn't know that while I was upside down and water began rushing in through the door seals. I cut the crap out of my hand, shattering the rear window. The most important thing that happened that frigid night was a douchebag in a Camaro blew right past us while we were standing next to the road, and then a couple in a minivan pulled up to the stop sign a minute later and drove us all the way home. Like 30 minutes out of their way. I still stop anytime I see someone in need because of them. I once had my foot cut off in a car accident. The doctor reattached it. Lots of nerve damage. I fall down occasionally. Most of the time I don't. I worry that at some point in my life it will be amputated. I fear the concept of ruining my body. Hearing a car crash right outside my apartment. Afterwards hearing blood-curdling screams of pain from the guy that was injured. That shit was too real. All the people gathering outside to watch and make sure someone called an ambulance. I had a panic attack after I missed a final for one of my classes my first semester at college. It was the first panic attack I'd experienced. It started when my professor told me that everyone has already left, and I had a hard time controlling it until I could get out to my car. The professor was nice enough to let me come in the next day when he had a class taking the same exam. Once I got out to my car I stopped trying to control it, and I was hyperventilating and crying. I lost the feeling in my hands and face. It was pretty bad. And I was completely alone. After several minutes, I realized I needed to get home. So I started driving while still having a panic attack, and I was freaking out cause I still couldn't really feel my hands. It was scary. When I was in high school about 10 years ago I was home alone while my mom went to pick up my brother, and before my mom left she told me to bring the dogs in. Now we had 2 beagles, one that was friendly but barked loud and an older one that we had gotten from the shelter was extremely protective and was not afraid to show his teeth. I ignored her and left them outside for a bit. I was in the back part of the house and was on the computer when I heard a noise. I walked to our front room and saw a young guy near the front door who knocked. I stood slightly out of sight and saw him walk near our window and then back to the door and knocked again but also tried the door. Immediately, my blood went cold and I rushed to the back door and quietly yelled for the dogs to come in. They ran in and I herded them to the front room and I heard the mailbox slot open. Right away my older beagle got on the defensive and growled the "I'm gonna fucking bite you" growl while the other one barked. I got my phone and called my mom and begged her to come back home, which she did with my brother. They looked around and saw no other signs of entry. I triple check every door now, and even though those 2 dogs have passed away, I keep our current dog near me when home alone. Since about a year and a half ago, I've been treated for schizophrenia. I don't have a lot of hallucinations besides some voices as I'm going to sleep, and my delusions weren't paranoid delusions, but more grandiose and religious. Anyway, I was treated after I designed and built a miniature guillotine out of 3D printed parts and a box cutter blade and used it to cut my tongue off. I actually only managed to cut it about half off, so they reattached it and I can speak and eat fine now. But it took me months to plan this and build the device, and every morning as I woke up and I struggled to pull my dreams apart from reality, I had to realize over and over again that the horror hidden in my desk a few feet away was not a dream, but something very real that was going to hurt me very bad. Every morning that my mom came to wake me up, I hoped she would somehow see it and help me. But I couldn't get my thoughts together until I was awake, and when I was awake it wouldn't scare me anymore. So I never cried for help. Some parts were scary at the time. The entire thing is kinda scary in hindsight. I had a semester in college that broke down who I was as a human being. I have major depressive disorder that, along with other diagnoses, in remission, and this semester was the most emotionally challenging thing I have ever experienced. On top of that, I was still trying new meds. Essentially, it induced psychosis and amped up my eating disorder tenfold. I was seeing bugs and feeling them on my body mostly, and I thought my room and electronics were bugged, so I spent a lot of time covering up holes, putting tape over my cameras, moving my room around to cover outlets and stuff, hiding from my window. Meanwhile, I went 3 weeks straight without eating, a few more with heavily restricting. That was pretty rough. Anyway, I'm on better meds now lol. I can't count how many scary moments I have been though that could take that title. But I guess that guy trying to climb into the back of a rented limo for my sister's 16th with an 8-inch blade trying to stab us all while the driver was stopped at the lights and couldn't hear us screaming was pretty bad. I was 21 working the overpass shift at a 24-hour pharmacy when a guy ran in with a ski mask and gun and robbed the store. He made me get on the ground and took my coworker to all the registers and empty them into bag, then ran out and jumped into a getaway car and drove off. Still had to finish my shift after that too. He and his accomplices were arrested a couple weeks later and he did 6 years in prison for armed robbery. I got a notification in the mail from the state when he was released. Gee, thanks.